Welcome back to part 3 of chapter 14 on the causes of hunger in the United States. So this graph is in your book, and what it's showing is the income level in the United States is directly correlated with education level. And education and poverty, what we see is people with little education or work experience are trapped in this cycle of poverty. They're unable to find high-paying jobs, so they've got to work longer hours at lower-paying jobs to support themselves and their families. And this low income reduces access to transportation and childcare, which also can limit access to better jobs. And then longer work hours reduce the amount of time available to pursue additional education and training necessary to find higher paying jobs. And limited income and transportation prohibit relocation to areas where better jobs are available. Excuse me. So what about vulnerable life stages? We learned that the high nutrient needs of pregnant and lactating women and small children put them at particular risk for undernutrition. Almost a third of households with children headed by single women live below the poverty line. Poverty and food insecurity place women and children at risk for undernutrition, and their special nutritional needs magnify this risk. Because of their increased need for some nutrients, undernutrition may occur in pregnant women, infants, and children, even when the rest of the household is adequately fed. So, for example, the amount of iron in the family's diet may be enough to prevent anemia in all the family members except a pregnant teenager. Elderly individuals are vulnerable to food insecurity and undernutrition due to the higher frequency of diseases and disabilities in this population. Diseases and disability may limit their ability to purchase, prepare, and consume food, and I think we saw that in the last few chapters. And greater nutritional risk among older adults is associated with more hospital admissions and higher healthcare costs. And the number of individuals over age 85 is expected to triple by 2050 as the number of elderly people increases. So will the number of people at risk for food insecurity. So now we recognize all of the issues, and how do we eliminate hunger? What are the strategies to address population growth, sustainable agriculture, international trade? And we're going to discuss 5 of the federal programs designed to alleviate hunger in the United States. So solving the problem of world hunger is a daunting task. In 1996, the World Food Summit set a goal of cutting world hunger in half by 2015. Current estimates put the number of undernourished people in the world at about 842 million. We know that some progress has been made, but it's far from the World Summit's goal of less than 500 million. So what are some solutions to world hunger? We need to address population growth. We need to ensure that the nutrient needs of a large and diverse population are met with culturally acceptable foods. And we need to increase food production without damaging the global ecosystem. So meeting these goals will require input from politicians, nutrition scientists, economists, and the food industry. Here we see the Millennium Development Goals, and they have been the most successful global anti-poverty effort in history. And since they were established by the United Nations Millennium Summit in 2000, the number of people living in extreme poverty and the proportion of people without access to safe drinking water has been cut in half, and visible improvements have been made in primary education and all health areas, including significant progress in the fight against malaria and tuberculosis. So one is to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, 2, achieve universal primary education, 3, to promote gender equality and empower women, 4, to reduce child mortality, so that's child deaths, 5, to improve maternal health, 6, to combat HIV, AIDS, malaria, and other diseases, 7, to ensure environmental sustainability, and 8, for global partnership for development. So short-term food aid is when people are starving. Short-term food aid and medical aid must be provided right away. The standard approach has been to bring food into stricken areas, and this food generally consists of agricultural surpluses from other countries and is often not well planned in terms of its nutritional content. And though this type of relief is necessary for a population to survive in an immediate crisis like a famine or a war, it does little to prevent future hunger. And here's a picture. We know that many organizations are working to combat world hunger. The American Red Cross and the High Commissioner for Refugees of the UN concentrate on famine relief, and the FAO, the Food and Agricultural Organization, works to improve the production, intake, and distribution of food worldwide. And the World Health Organization focuses on international health and emphasizes the prevention of nutrition problems. And the UN Children's Fund, or UNICEF, targets education and vaccination and responds to crisis situations to improve the lives of children. So what about population growth? In the long term, solving the problem of world hunger requires balancing the number of people and the amount of food that can be produced. The world's population has increased dramatically, and we talked a little bit about that. But since the middle of the 20th century, population growth has begun to slow. The birth rate worldwide has declined from 5 children per woman in the 1950s to about 2.5 children per woman in 2012. And this downward trend in population growth must continue to ensure that food production and natural resources can support the population. And we know that changes in cultural and economic factors, as well as family planning and government policies, can be used to influence birth rates. We know that economic and cultural factors affect birth rates in many cultures. A large family is expected. A major reason for this is due to high infant and child mortality rates, meaning they have multiple children because they know that some of their children or infants won't survive. When infant mortality rates are high, people choose to have more children. Higher birth rates in some developing countries are also due to economic and societal roles of children. Children need to work on farms or take care of the elders, and they may contribute to the economic survival of families. We know that government programs that foster economic development and ensure access to food, shelter, and medical care have been shown to cause a decline in birth rates because people feel secure having less children. And economic development also reduces the need for children as workers. Another cultural factor that influences birth rate is gender inequality. Girls are often kept at home to work rather than being sent to school, and in most developing countries, the literacy rate is lower for women than for men, and fewer women attend primary and secondary schools, and this lack of education leaves women few options other than remaining home and having children. We know that providing education for girls has been shown to reduce birth rates. What about family planning and government policies? So We know that in culture and economic factors reduce the desire for larger families, but reducing birth rates, we have to have health and family planning services available. And to be successful, family planning efforts must be acceptable to the population and compatible with cultural and religious beliefs. And governments around the world use a number of approaches, such as providing contraceptives, education on family planning, and even economic incentives to decrease population growth. What is sustainable agriculture? So we're hearing a lot about sustainability now, and we know that advances in agriculture technology have allowed food production to keep the pace with population growth. However, the use of this more modern, energy-intensive techniques has contributed to pollution and environmental progress. We continue to hear a lot about sustainable agriculture. So what that is sustainable agriculture uses food production methods that prevent damage to the environment and allow land to restore itself so that food can be produced indefinitely. For example, contour plowing and terracing help prevent erosion, keeping the soil available for future crops. Rotating the crops grown in a field prevents the depletion of nutrients in the soil, reducing the need for fertilizers. And sustainable agriculture uses environmentally friendly chemicals that degrade quickly and do not persist as residues in the environment. And it also relies on diversification. The approach to farming maximizes natural methods of pest control and fertilization and protects farmers from changes in the marketplace. So here's a diagram of sustainable farming. A sustainable farm consists of a total agricultural ecosystem rather than a single crop. It may include field crops, fruit and nut-bearing trees, herds of livestock, and forests. And here on the left you can see growing a different crop in the field each year helps minimize keeps the soil healthy and minimizes soil erosion. It reduces problems caused by crop disease, insects, pests, and weeds. Increasing biological diversity in the crops and animals protects the farmer, maximizes natural pest control, and minimizes pesticide input. And then having both crops and livestock allows the farmer to recycle crop nutrients by spreading livestock manure on a field, and animals can feed on weeds and crop waste that can't be used as human food. What about what's economic development? So as far as economic development, we know that hunger will exist as long as there's poverty, that the poor don't have access to enough food to maintain their nutritional health. So developing the economy of a population of people leads to safe and sanitary housing, access to healthcare, education, and resources to acquire enough food. And it's important that government policies that reduce poverty and improve food security are focused on increasing a population's income, lowering food prices, or funding food programs. What about increasing food availability through trade? Whether a country is agricultural emphasis is on producing crops for subsistence or cash crops. What we know is that this influences the availability of food for its people. Shifting to cash crops improves the country's cash flow, but uses local resources to produce crops for export and limits the availability of to its people to produce enough food to feed their own families. So, for example, a large portion of the arable land in a country is used to grow cash crops like coffee and tea, and that leaves little land for growing grains and vegetables that nourish the local population. But if the cash from the crop is used to purchase nutritious fruits from other countries, and provide it to people at an economic level they can afford, this may help alleviate undernutrition.